Our guest today is author, speaker, career strategist, and coach, Julia Toothacre. Julia, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, John. I'm happy to be here.
So Julia, let's start off with you sharing a little bit about what you do and more importantly, why.
Yeah, so I am a career coach and strategist. I equip ambitious corporate professionals who value the 9 to 5 to strategize and take action to help them control their career as well as advance in their career. And this is something that I have been doing for over 10 years. I'm very passionate about helping people do this because I went through a career change actually pretty early in my career. And so that's something that I want to help people walk through. I also was part of really toxic environments while I was working. And so I think the idea of helping people understand and manage and get out of environments that aren't a good fit for them is something that I really want to help people do. So this idea of controlling your career is really the central piece and like the cornerstone to the work that I do.
And you know, this is an outcropping of your own experience. And this is, you know, in some way, your way of giving back and helping people not go through what you experienced. Toxic behaviors are tough, right? I mean, they're not pleasant.
Yes. And one thing I want to make sure that the audience understands is while I do use my own personal story as a relation point and part of why I do what I do, I have actually been in career development for over 10 years. So I've been actively working as a career coach. I'm trained in coaching and counseling. And I think that's one difference between my background as a career coach and some other career coaches that you might find out there. So I just have to put that point out there as well.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So we're going to talk a little bit about generosity, and then later on I'm going to ask you for some tips, things to avoid, things to do, things to learn from. But before we do that, let's talk just a little bit more about your career. Who's your ideal client? I mean, you'll serve everyone, I'm certain, but who gets the most benefit from your services?
Yeah, the people that get the most benefit from me generally are in a more corporate setting, a more traditional setting, and they're usually in their mid-career. And so what mid-career means is you likely have about 10 plus years of experience, but you're also not at the executive level. So I very intentionally do not work with executives. I love working with either individual contributors who are mid-career or people who are managing or aspiring managers mid-career. So that's kind of my client profile, but also people who are really, really ambitious. They want more out of life. They want to push themselves. They want more in their career. And people who are ambitious, they always, you know, you have a time in your career where you don't know what you're doing. You know, you don't know where you're headed or life happens, something like that. And those are the people that I tend to gravitate to the most, and I'm able to help the most as well, because I'm really good at helping them step back and see the bigger picture of what's going on, and then help them create a custom plan and a custom strategy to get to that place.
So what I heard you saying is, hey, clarity for a lot of people is super important, and you're helping these folks kind of figure out what that looks like because they don't know. That's one of the big challenges I'm certain that you're helping them with. What are some of the other things that you see as challenges in the marketplace? Because, you know, why wouldn't just anybody pick up and change jobs and career whenever they wanted to?
Right. Yeah. So you hit it. Clarity is usually the number one thing. What we're dealing with a lot right now is also a misalignment of values. Values are huge for a lot of people. And if we look generationally, the millennial generation and Gen Z, who's coming after the millennials, they are very values driven. And so when their values aren't aligning, whether that's with the actual day-to-day work that they do or the company at large, that also becomes a huge barrier for people. And so I'm seeing a lot of my own clients and then just people generally out in the workforce making shifts because they don't like what their company is doing, or they just aren't aligning the way that they used to.
So in your process, well, just one more thing before we get to generosity. In your process, or would you share your process? Like when you meet with somebody new, what's that look like? How does that go?
Yeah, so I treat every client individually, which I think for most coaches, that's what we do. Every client is an individual. And I'll actually shift my process a little bit depending on who that person is and what they need in that moment. But the overall general process is figuring out what are their immediate needs. So what is the thing that is weighing down on them in that moment? Because a lot of times, whatever that is the barrier for us to do any other kind of good work together. So I try to do like a brain dump with them to figure out what's going on and kind of piece the puzzle together of what they actually need and get to the root of that. And then from there, I create custom strategies and custom coaching plans for my client. So no client looks the same. I have a handful of clients right now, and all of their coaching plans look completely different based on what their needs are in that moment.
Yes, we have kind of a general path. Like here's the path up the mountain, but there's a lot of this, right? And this is different for everybody because we need to meet them where they are. So let's shift to generosity, right? So in your business, in your life, what is generosity? How does that fit for you?
Yeah, so this is such an interesting question because I know when we talked previously, I did not know how to answer this question. And I think that some of that comes from we don't walk around thinking, oh, here's how I'm generous today. It's likely something you just do because it's part of who you are. It's ingrained into your personality or your value set. And the more that we started talking about it, I realized that a lot of my business is actually built on generosity. And what I mean by that is I have a podcast, I have a career podcast where I do my own episodes and then I interview people, and that's free, that's out there. And so my episodes that I do where I'm teaching career topics, I teach everything. I teach you as if you are a client sitting in front of me. So I don't hold back on that. And so that's something that is free, that is out there for the general public to consume. The other side of that, I have a lot of free content on my website because I believe that the majority of career information and content should be accessible and should be available to people. And then the other side, and this was something that I did really intentionally with my business. It was when I started my business, I knew that this was something I wanted to do. I give back 5% of my gross profits every year. And that was something that I absolutely knew based on my personal values that I wanted to be a part of my business. And so those were some of the things that I realized, oh, these are actually generous acts, even though that's not necessarily how I would have categorized it initially in my head.
Well, they are, and in some ways, I think it is. I think it's, it's how we grew up, it's mindset. But my goal here with the show is to let people know that there's lots of different opportunities to be generous, and to try and shift that mindset so that we respond to what's out there coming at us with generosity instead of anger or unhappiness or dismay or depression or any of those things, because those just aren't very positive. And a lot of times, if we could just take that generous approach, it would make a big difference. In your podcast or on your website, every now and then somebody pick up the phone, call you, send you an email and say, what do they tell you?
Can you ask that a different way?
Well, okay, so somebody that listens to your podcast, do they ever reach out and say and comment on your podcast?
Yes, actually, I get messages quite a bit on LinkedIn from people who will either ask a follow-up question or just tell me how helpful the episodes were for them. And actually, this was really fun. This started happening last year when I brought guests on. My guests would actually send me messages and tell me that they would get people reaching out to them because they were a guest on the podcast and they were able to help people in their career as well. So that was actually a really fun win for me that I didn't really think about when I was having guests on.
So when that happened, and this I think is really one of the keys to generosity, how'd you feel?
Oh, amazing. I think you could probably see in when I was just talking about it, my facial expression, all of that shifts because it feels really good to, I just help. I just want to help people.
Yeah. Well,
and it feels great.
I worked in downtown LA and I, walked by homeless on a frequent basis. Every day I went to lunch. But every now and then, I'd reach in my pocket and I couldn't afford to give money to everybody, but, every now and then I reach in my pocket and take whatever I had and drop it in somebody's hat. And it just made me feel good. And I to me, that's God speaking, like, do this, you need to do this. And I don't argue, just do it. But those feelings you get of happiness and joy and self-satisfaction, you kind of get those, and I don't think you plan on those, they just happen. And they're really valuable. Right, because the world's got so much stuff going on that's not necessarily pleasant, and here's this opportunity where we can get some of that joy, and typically you can't buy joy. So I find that really spectacular. So in your business, you're donating 5% off the top, right, from the top line to a charity, and then you've got your podcast and you've got your material on your website. Do you ever just help people because you kind of connected with them and they ask you a couple of questions and all of a sudden you say, well, gosh, half hour's gone by or an hour's gone by, I gotta go. I got something.
Yeah, so one of the other things I do is I give people about a half an hour of my time. So if somebody messages me and they're interested in working with me or they have a question, usually I'll do a little bit of back and forth through email or message. But if I feel like it could be worth an additional conversation, I'll give them a half an hour. And the reason for this is some people just need just a quick reset.
A little starter.
And talking to somebody I can do a lot in 30 minutes. I can get your story and I can give you either some encouragement or I can give you some quick strategies, or we can talk about if coaching is going to be appropriate or if I can refer. So this actually happened, probably a couple months ago. Somebody reached out to me. She had been following me, engaging with me, so I was somewhat familiar with who she was. And we jumped on the phone for a half an hour, and she was doing all the right things. And so I told her, I was like, you're doing it. Just keep going. You will find the right position. You will get there. I promise. And I think it was within about a month or so, she found the new position that she wanted and she messaged me and she's like, thank you so much. This was amazing. And it was all I needed to keep going. And she's in a new position and she absolutely loves it. So I always try to give that half hour to people when it's appropriate, because either they're going to sign on with me and it's going to be great, or I know that I can provide value to them in that half hour and maybe they'll refer somebody to me. So,
you make that half hour valuable. That lady
Absolutely.
needed affirmation and you gave it to her and she was able to take it and run with it. And, anytime I'm working with somebody, I really want to make that time super valuable. And whether it's paid or not paid or pro bono or whatever, my job is to turn on light bulbs, create energy, create inspiration, get them going. And, I got to be honest with you, I don't always get paid for that, but I always get joy out of that. It just makes me happy. So it does.
Same here.
And, just don't get it everywhere. So let's talk a little bit more about in the career strategy / coach space where you're at. What are some things that, if I'm in that space, if I'm in that mid-career manager, what are some things that I should avoid doing in terms of finding my new place or new direction, new company?
Right. So one of the things that I would avoid is taking advice from either too many people or the wrong people. One of the things that I talk to clients about quite a bit is who has your ear, who is speaking into your life, and is that the most appropriate person to be speaking into your career decisions? And this is one of the things that I use. a little bit in terms of why you should have a career coach.
Sure.
Not everybody needs a career coach, but the benefits of that is I'm somebody who's neutral. So what you decide in your life is not going to impact me. But if you're talking to your significant other, which you absolutely should take your significant other's opinion.
In my case, she may not be the best at career advice for
right,
me.
But they're, whatever their hangups are in their own career or their worldview is going to influence what they say to you. So you have to understand where that other person is coming from. Same with parents. Same with professors. That's probably the worst one.
Okay.
Same with managers, former managers, mentors. All of these people have their own experience, their own worldview, and their own just thoughts on the world of work that comes from what they have experienced. They are not you. So they're not always going to be able to look past themselves and say, I think that this could be a good move for you because XYZ. Some people can do that, but not everyone. And so as somebody who might be wanting to make a switch, you just want to be aware of the person that you're talking to and what their view is going to be of you and your situation.
Right, because we all have one. And some are more neutral, some are more biased, some are,
Yes.
yeah, okay, I get it. Is there anything else in particular that you see from an avoidance standpoint?
Yeah, so I also see people go straight to the resume. I gotta fix my resume. Gotta fix my resume. And yes, that's true. You will need to write a resume, do all of that. But you have to be clear. So we're going back to clarity. You have to be clear about who you are, where you're at, and what you want before you start writing the resume. So if you think I'm ready to advance, I'm ready to make a switch, or I need to get out of this toxic environment, and immediately you go to, okay, let's update the resume. That's not the first step. The first step is, what do I like about what I'm doing now? What don't I like? What do I want to do next? And make those decisions first so that when you're looking, you look for a position that fits what you're looking for, then go and update the resume so that you're not having to do double the work.
So you kind of gave it you stepped into the next question too, like don't just jump into the resume, but do this first. And I think so I think it's a combination when we're trying to figure out the keys, right? We want to avoid the missteps and we want to do the right things. So what are some of the other, quote, right things that somebody in that space would be in that they should take advantage of?
Yeah, so one of the things that I tell people all the time is the best time to look for a job is when you don't need one. I think that's a pretty common saying that we hear from people, and it's true. And so if you're happy in your career, or you're good, or you're in a place where you're coasting by, which is absolutely fine, make sure that you're still doing some things to help future you. So whether that's planning, some networking, Zoom meetings now, depending on where you are, a coffee, a chat, a phone call, keep up your relationship with your network, even in the good times. Because as we've seen over the last couple of years, you never know what's going to happen. You never know when you're going to need that network to come in and help support you. And so keeping some steady, habits around your career and career building will be really helpful for you in the future when you do decide to move on.
Yeah, we clearly understand that we never know when adversity is going to strike. Certainly nobody expected the last couple of years. And we just don't get to decide when problems show up. So being prepared is what you're saying, right? Keep your network up to speed. What about in terms of, is there anything particular areas of professional development that are really effective or important and valuable today that you're seeing?
Technical skills. I think more and more positions are asking for technical skills, and that looks different depending on where you're at.
I'm gonna stop you. I want to ask you to expand that just a little bit. So what do you mean by technical skills?
So like I said, it depends. It depends on the position, but every industry, every functional area has different tools that they use to be successful, whether that's it's usually a piece of software that they're using, or even Zoom or whatever email client you use. Every company has their own thing that they use. And so being familiar with what is the most common within your industry, you likely already have the experience for that. But staying up to date on that and staying current with whatever the technological needs are within your company or your industry or your functional area is really going to help, because then you're on top of it and you don't necessarily have to be taught those things if you go to another company. So, and that can look, again, it looks different for each industry. So I'm being a little bit vague.
Yeah, but I understand. I got it, right? So email, productivity tools, data management tools, depending on what your career is, but being on top of, aware of, and hopefully on top of whatever those technology issues are. Now, one of the things, and I'm just going to go down this path because I find it fascinating, but technology is changing so quickly today that I think some people might feel overwhelmed trying to just keep up.
Right.
What would you recommend in that?
Yeah. And honestly, that it's for all of us. So some people think that, you're younger, you grew up with technology, you understand it. That's not true. I mean, I happen to be very good with technology, but just yesterday I was on a call with a client and I had the Zoom setup wrong. And I didn't realize it until we were on the call and I couldn't record it. And I was like, what the heck just happened? So we had to get off the call. I had to send a new calendar invite, and I've been using Zoom forever, for years before the pandemic hit. So even those of us who understand technology, there are still things that we're not going to know. We're still going to have to learn it. And I think if you're somebody that doesn't pick up on it as much, I know my husband, who's my age, he's not a big technology person. It takes him a long time because his work has never required that of him. And so it's just not something that he puts his time into. But there are so many opportunities out there to learn, to do different trainings and certifications and things in simple technologies that we use all the time. So if you're not comfortable with that, take the initiative to get the training, to learn, or to ask for help from somebody who is willing to do that and learn and keep up to date with it. You have to control that for yourself and your career.
Yeah, always be willing to learn and to grow, because I tell people we're on a downward escalator, right? You have to walk up if you're going to get anywhere. You don't get to just stay in the middle and be static. You've got to continuously move up. Life keeps throwing curveballs. It doesn't stop happening. So let's talk about wisdom for just a minute, right? So again, for your particular client, they're this mid-manager, so to speak. Where can they go? Obviously, they can spend some time with you, but where can they go? Are there any particular books or videos? And obviously, your website is a place where they can get some tools. Where can they get some wisdom?
Oh man, I think the place that I direct clients to the most, this is male, female, regardless of level, Brené Brown.
I'm a big Brené Brown fan. Yes.
Anything Brené Brown, read it. Read all of it. Read it multiple times. Specifically, if you're in, the corporate space or you're a leader, I know you have a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners who will likely be watching this. Dare to Lead, hands down, probably one of the best books I've read ever. She's amazing at talking about leadership and empathy, and so good. So anything Brené Brown, that from a wisdom standpoint, what I love about her is all of her content is research based. So she does throw in stories of her own experience and experience from the people that she interviewed, but it is all based in research, and 100% read Brené Brown.
Yeah, she's entertaining too. I've watched a lot of her TED Talks. I mean,
yes,
they're good. They're good. All right, so that's your favorite, I'm pretty certain, because that came right off the top. But who comes in a close second?
Oh gosh. I think Brendan Bruchard is somebody who, and this is recent for me. I didn't know who he was until I went into the entrepreneurial space. And he also, a lot of his content, a lot of his books are based in research as well. He actually has his own research company that he does research for his books. But he has two books in particular that really helped me out. One is High Performance Habits. And so that really hits on high achievers and people who are high performing. So for me, it was really impactful book. And then another one called Motivation Manifesto.
Oh, that's a great book.
Man, you want to talk about wisdom? That book. I think I was highlighting everything in that book when I was reading it. It was amazing.
Well, and Brendan's had his own set of highs and lows that he's willing to share. And
his story is amazing.
It's coming from the heart, and I think that's really, and Brene Brown's stuff comes from the heart too. So, so we're going to wrap up in just a minute, but you just mentioned this entrepreneur and your journey in the entrepreneur world, right? So that's the world that my audience connects with, and your individual. I know you've been in the career strategy and planning for 10 years, but you probably learned some things about being an entrepreneur. What are some of the things that you learned to avoid or do as an entrepreneur?
This question has such great timing because I really feel like the last 6 months or so in my entrepreneurial journey, I have really taken a step back to go, what do I want to do? What is working? So what's the ROI that I'm getting in the different things that I'm doing? And am I happy with how things are progressing? And so when we talk about, what are the things you would do or not do, I think everything I did up to this point got me to this point.
Right.
So I wouldn't redo it. Are there some different choices I may have made? Maybe, but overall, I'm really happy with the journey that I took to get here. And so for me, as somebody who came from a more corporate setting where I was working 9 to 5, this online business idea was foreign to me. I understood how to run a business. I understood the components of a business and all of that. But the online execution of it was where I had a pretty big gap. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure that out, trying to figure out social media and all of that. And actually, just a couple weeks ago, I made the decision to stop using one of my social media platforms because I wasn't getting an ROI there. And it was a platform that I actually started on, and that was where I launched my business. And I've been doing tons of work toward that platform. But the way algorithms are and all of that, the return hasn't been there. And so I've put a pause on it. And if you had asked me a year ago, I'd been like, oh no, I'm absolutely going to do this. Yeah, I'm never going to stop using this platform. But now, stopped using it, absolutely happy. It has not changed anything so far. And it was such a great decision. And so all that to say, I think as an entrepreneur, you have to constantly be evaluating, is this working? Am I happy? Where do I want to go? What makes sense for me? And so that's a question those are questions I'm always asking myself to make sure that I'm balanced within my business and that I'm doing activities within my business that have a return, which I know I spent a lot of time doing things that didn't have a return, and I'm not doing that anymore. So,
well, make no mistake. I mean, you're running a business for a return. You're running business to generate revenue. And if you're not trying to generate revenue, it's really just a hobby. There's a reason why we're doing it, and you have to decide. And I think you're making a great point, that part about being happy. Do I like doing this? Yeah, we're here to make money, but there's a lot of time and energy spent in this space. And if you didn't like doing it, that would not be very much fun. There's not much joy in that space. So I commend you for making that decision. And interesting, because a year ago you wouldn't have made that decision, and you probably would have argued against it.
Yep.
But here you are, and you did that.
Yeah.
One last don't wisdom piece as an entrepreneur. What do you got?
I don't know if this is a do or don't, but so coming from like that 9 to 5 life, you're really trained to think a certain way, to work a certain way. And it took me a while to train myself out of that. And so I guess it's a do.
Yeah.
My do is, well, one, give yourself grace if you're making that transition as well, because you will get caught up in, okay, I have to work at 9 and then I have to shut off at 5 and I need to make sure that I'm productive. And you get really caught up in that. For me, it was learning, when do I work best during the day? So really learning to track my energy highs and lows throughout the day and create a schedule that worked for me, that didn't look like a traditional 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 schedule. And it took me a long time to shift my mindset around that, to feel comfortable, because it felt so foreign to me to do that. Now I'm good.
Yeah, it took you a little while to shift, to adapt, but
yeah,
it's
been a couple years.
Snap your fingers, it's done. Yeah.
Right. But we got there, and now I understand how I work so much better, because I had to go through, really, overworking, underworking, all of those different things to find the balance. And now it's been great. I would say, again, probably about the last 6 months or so, I've been really spot on with how I look at my work and how I schedule and all of that. And it's been really wonderful.
Yeah. So balancing your energy levels with the day. I'm way better first thing in the morning. I mean, I get total energy if I have hard projects, thinking projects, I want them first thing in the morning.
Yep.
And I love talking to people. I like working with people. I like doing this show. This is good afternoon stuff. I get energy from this, right? Where I need energy from other people. But if I have calculations or things that I have to do that require a lot of brain power, first thing in the morning is the best time. I'll get to the afternoon and I'll go, oh, no, I think we'll wait till tomorrow for that one. So yeah, I do that all the time. So Julie, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for being generous with your time and sharing your story and your generosity and your tips and your wisdom, and you represent what the show's trying to do. Let's make generosity, a cornerstone, right? I say unleash the generosity within. It's in all of us in some form or fashion. So thanks again for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This has been such a wonderful experience, and I hope that your audience finds value from it.
Well, I think they will. I think we will. We're getting started. It's going to be fun. All right, so wherever you're watching this show, thank you so much for joining us. Take a moment, be generous, scroll down, leave us a comment, hit that subscribe button. If you want to engage more around generosity and the LifeShine Generosity Project, you can join us at our community. It's www.lifeshine.live, L-I-V-E. And again, thanks for joining us, and may your light shine brighter every day.